Why do you use config max? It's probably one of the most common questions I get when I put it on a tank. Why not just experimental hardening? So this video will hopefully help you understand my reasoning behind it. And as some of you have probably guessed, it is all to do with the track health. Because let's go ahead and say that the Vickers Free is the subject matter of this video, regarding should I use config or should I use experimental hardening. The track health on the Vickers Free is 250. Now this means that if you do use bounty hardening, for instance, you are going to go ahead and get your track health up to 425. If you were to go ahead and use the field mods and put it in the correct slot and you use the standard version, you'd have 412. Now this track health right here is super important, because this basically decides whether or not your track gets blown off in one shot. And this 412 is alpha damage related. Yes, there is other external mathematics going on to do with module damage and how it's all calculated, but we have tested this. It is alpha damage related if you shoot the drive wheel of the track, which is either the front or the rear of the tank. If you shoot this and you have over this much alpha damage, you will track in one shot, providing you actually roll your alpha. If you low roll, you will not track in one shot. So it is still dictated by RNG. Say you have a 400 alpha damage gun. If you low rolled to 390, you would not track the Vickers in one shot. This is going to become very important as we go into the next stage, which is why don't I use experimental hardening? Well, if we go ahead and look at it, we put experimental hardening on tier 3, remember, this then makes the track health 375. And remember, this is at tier 3 level, which is very expensive. If we go down to tier 2, the track health is then 350, and at tier 1, it's in 325. And the vast majority of people don't have the resources to just whack on a tier 3 experimental hardening, because it's too expensive for them. So most people would probably be using tier 1 or tier 2, which is just a big no-no, especially with this much track health. The reason why this is so bad is that the vast majority of tanks that you're going to meet, they'll just be able to track you in one shot, including mediums. Obviously, against, say, like a 140 or something like that, then yes, you are relatively safe unless they high roll massively. But against most other tanks, such as an STB or anything higher than 360 alpha, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to get tracked in one shot. And this is the main reason why I don't use it on certain tanks. Remember, on certain tanks. Because unless there is a field mod that is in the tank that can increase the suspension durability or track health, then I'm not going to pick experimental hardening, tier 3, or God forbid, lower than that. Because think about it this way, if you're going to get tracked in one shot, why would you not want the faster repair speed of config and all the other benefits that you get from config, which are basically why you would use experimental hardening in the first place? Because if your tank doesn't have these module issues, you're not going to pick experimental hardening, you're just going to pick hardening. So there's no point of using experimental hardening if you're going to get tracked in one shot regardless. And if we go ahead and click the comparison, and as you can see, the experimental hardening is just down on everything. Your engine health is less. That's 640 compared to 800 that you would get with config. You would have the repair time of 10 seconds with experimental hardening and 8.6 with config. And the ammo rack as well as the fuel tanks are 100 less than what you would have with config. And this is tier 3, remember. And not only that, but if we do go ahead and go back into game quickly, you'll see that bounty offers a lot more for what you're getting in comparison to this. Because the hardening one, experimental hardening, is based around that suspension hit points, and once it gets fully repaired, it's back to full health, which is great if you have a good enough track health to start with. Whereas the config will prevent one fuel tank fire, one ammo rack explosion, and engine destruction in the course of the battle. Notice that it does not prevent engine fires, so please watch out for that. However, your internal module durability is up a lot, so the chance of that engine fire happening is substantially decreased. So then, experimental hardening is useless then? No, because as I said at the start, it really depends on the track health of the tank. The Vickers, for example, is useless with experimental hardening. But the Centurion Action 10 would be a very good tank to have experimental hardening on. Because once you go ahead and get all the field mods and you put experimental hardening on it, and yes, this tank does like getting ammo racked and set on fire and stuff, so it is a very good candidate for this, that last field mod increases the suspension durability by 30%, and then your track health goes up to 487. making it so good. In fact, it's kind of a must-have on this tank, to be honest with you, because it does make the tank so much better. The exact same thing is for basically any tank that can use the right-hand field mod or has 300 base track health. Because if we take a look at the mouse and put the experimental hardening on it, you'll see that 450 track health, and you can go ahead and use the right-hand field mod, 495, with all the extra benefits that you'll receive from experimental hardening. Which is why I have been saying for years at this point, you need to go and have a look at the track health before you go ahead and use this field mod, or hardening in general for that matter. When kitting out your heavy tanks, you need to make sure that you have a look at the effective top speed range. If these two are exactly the same, you can go ahead and use the right-hand field mod for the first one, because it's just free track health given to you. And even if you couldn't use the right-hand field mod, you still have more than enough track health to withstand most of the tanks that you're going to be facing. And yes, obviously tank destroyers are going to excel at this as well, because Jagdpanzer 100, left-hand field mod, you have 390 track health base now, and if you go ahead and put on experimental hardening, 585. Yep. So the track health is the biggest factor of when I will use hardening and when I'll use config. E6, for example, field mod, last one, 30% track health. So this tank is very, very nice. You can put that on there. Either way, just a very, very quick video. Hopefully this was eye-opening to you or just helpful in some way. If it was, then you know what to do. Leave a like down below, and I will see you all in the next one.